everybody, and welcome back to another Doctor Who Big Finish audio drama review. In today's review, I'm going to be taking a look at the penultimate release as a part of the Doctor Who Big Finish monthly range. Of course, a very integral part of the Big Finish catalogue, which has been going since 1999. I'm personally very sad to see this part of Doctor Who history come to an end. However, as one chapter comes to a close, another one opens, as Big Finish is promising a lot of exciting adventures in the future. In today's review, we're going to be taking a look at the February 2021 release, which is of course The Blazing Hour, as written by James Kettle, featuring Peter Davison as the Fifth Doctor, alongside Mark Strickson as Turlough. Now, this release is one that I just went into. I didn't read the description or anything like that. I didn't really know what it was going to be about. However, once again, I came out of the other side really pleasantly surprised by what this story has to offer. And the beauty about this episode is that you don't need any prior knowledge beforehand in order to listen to this release. It's not connected to any other trilogy, any other plot line. It is simply a very powerful Doctor Who story with quite a human connection in there as well, even though we are in the depths of space. A little bit of humanity and the problems of humanity is still niggling away at the narrative of this story. So first off, and as always, in the description below there will of course be a link to purchase this release from the Big Finish website. It's currently out now. The physical CD is £14.99 and the download is £12.99. There is also additional story details on the Big Finish website, as well as a trailer that you can of course listen to. So without further ado, let's take a look at the production details on the Big Finish website. To start off with, the cover artist is Tom Webster, a really lovely fiery cover art for this release. The director is Ken Bentley, the music has been done by Howard Carter, the producer is David Richardson, the script editor is John Dorney, the sound design Lee Adams, the episode has been written by James Kettle, and the executive producers are Nicholas Briggs and Jason Haigh-Ellery. And this episode is another perfect example of a Doctor Who story that has been recorded remotely due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, the quality of this story is still as high as ever. You cannot tell that this episode has literally been recorded between different countries, including the United Kingdom, New Zealand and Greece. It all sounds very streamlined. It sounds like all the characters are in the same room. Very impressive piece of audio with lots of great sound design in there as well. So massive thumbs up for this release when it comes to production and general sounds. So firstly, starting off by taking a look at the TARDIS team, we have Peter Davison as the Fifth Doctor, alongside Turlough as portrayed by Mark Strickson. Now, it's really lovely to have another episode of Mark Strickson as Turlough, because I always feel like I've not really heard too much of his character. Of course, it was a trilogy, I do believe maybe 2 years ago it would have been, with Chameleon, of course, alongside Tegan and Nessa, and it's nice to have just a story with the Fifth Doctor and Turlough together, because I do believe it is in fact paralleling the second episode as a part of the monthly range way back in the 1990s, where it was in fact the Fifth Doctor and Turlough together, and then we're mirroring that with this final story before the very end, which does of course come out next month. Turlough is a very interesting character. It is nice to have an all-male TARDIS team, because it is very rare that this actually happens within Doctor Who history. Of course, we do have male companions, however, we don't really tend to have an all-male TARDIS team. I'm very much getting vibes of, say, the First Doctor and Stephen, the Second Doctor and Jamie, and as a result the dynamic does change, and especially because we have this vulnerability with the Fifth Doctor, we have that being utilised throughout this story, as we have a moment where the Fifth Doctor believes that Turlough has been killed, and this kind of triggers a little bit of PTSD, because of course he's lost Adric, another male companion, and he's a Doctor that is absolutely distraught about the concept of losing people. He does have a vulnerability, this incarnation, but within this story I definitely get the vibe of a Doctor that is kind of reaching the end of his tether. He's a little bit fed up with humanity, and to be quite honest, because of the characters that we come across throughout this story, I don't particularly blame him. So yes, overall for Peter Davison and Mark Strickson, thumbs up. A very good TARDIS team for this episode, and James Kettle does a very good job of writing them. I think that even though I've not listened to many Fifth Doctor and Turlough stories in the past, instantly throughout this episode you get used to it. It's this TARDIS team and they work very well. They're pretty much disconnected throughout the entirety of this story. Turlough is off doing one thing and the Fifth Doctor has a little bit more of a hands-on, dramatic approach, and as a result we get two brilliant sort of stories going on at the same time, and then they come together at the very end, which is a really good way in fact to lead on this narrative. So now moving on to the actual storyline itself. As I mentioned previously, I didn't really know what to expect going into this episode. I've seen a lot of fire on the cover, of course the actual title is The Blazing Hour, and I couldn't help but think this episode did seem very religious to start off with. I think even the title, The Blazing Hour, it sounds almost romantic and poetic the way it has been described, and that's kind of reflected within the cover art as well. And as we kind of go into the story, you soon realise that it's not religious or anything like that. It's certainly not romantic. It is in fact a very bleak political story with an underlining human vibe, which quite frankly leaves a bit of a sour taste in the mouth, I can't lie. It's one of those episodes that's really gripping and actually immerses you in the scenario. So basically the Doctor and Turlough arrive on the planet Testament. Basically the humans have gone out into space, and where humans go, they do of course colonise, and they need to make money. So they have their own economy, and basically they've decided to create this science, or found out a way to basically create this technology where they can harvest extreme amounts of power in order to power starliners, rockets, and whatever else humans need power for. There is a little bit of a mystery going on as to how this power is actually created. So we're basically in this industrial setting. You have the humans who've gone out into space, and then you also have the people who live on the planet Testament as well, the actual inhabitants, and they've kind of been forced together and forced to live with each other, basically. And we have two separate sort of parties throughout this story, where the people of Testament have the lower skilled jobs on the planet, even though they're highly skilled. However, humans think they're better. And then as a result, we have governments and politics, this time oozing from the planet Earth and then reaching the depths of space as well, leading to some rather ugly events throughout this story, which was very, very gripping to watch unfold. So taking a look at the supporting characters, we have Raki Ayola as Violet Hardacre, we have Donna Berlin as Montgomery and the Prime Minister, we have Raj Gashdak as Horrobin, and then we have Lindsay Murrell as Ellison. Now all of the people that we meet throughout this story really build that narrative. I think in particular Ellison, she's a scientist, she tries her best to basically make something positive out of a very bad situation. Horrobin is a guy at the very start of the episode that you think is in control of the situation. However, as the story goes on and the duration of the episode progresses, you realise that he is losing power more and more. And whilst we're on the subject of power, we have the Prime Minister and Violet Hardacre. And basically, we meet Violet at the very start of the story, and again, we think that she's a character that basically cannot be budged. She's the leader of the situation, nobody can tell her what to do. However, we then meet the Prime Minister of Earth at that current time, and basically she has control over her job, and she can just drop her like that, and that is it. She will lose everything. Everybody has their own personal motives and personal interests, and that basically adds confusion to what is otherwise a disaster that the Doctor quite obviously wants to help people because something has happened. However, finance, politics, and just grim opinions generally get in the way. There is in fact a lot of parallels throughout this story to that of politics and disasters. For example, I was getting vibes throughout this story of the Titanic, because we have a number of moments where we're in this big industrial power station, and if it explodes, it's going to create a very loud boom, and of course the people on the planet will be in danger of that very loud boom, and as a result an evacuation plan has been put in place. It has been thoroughly checked, it works very well. If it is followed, everybody on the planet will hopefully be able to escape and survive. However, there's one big problem, and it is of course that they haven't created enough ships to get everybody off the planet. So yes, it's kind of like that Titanic vibe of we're on the Titanic, however they've only put so many of the lifeboats on. Equally, we've got that power station thing in there as well. Nuclear energy, a bit like Chernobyl as it refers to in the behind the scenes. And of course there is something very scary about nuclear power and nuclear weapons. It's something that humanity has access to. As Turlough says throughout the story, one of his biggest concerns with humanity is that we have the power to blow up the world that we are on and basically wipe out all life as we know it, and that is just the click of one button, and that is definitely a theme that we see throughout this story. The thing that I really want to praise James Kettle for is the way that he's managed to create a story that is somehow hilarious yet very, very concerning at the same time, because even though we're on this alien world that is very, very different to our own, there is a wonderful commentary in there about politics and basically people in power and their motives. They will say one thing to somebody and then another thing to somebody else in order to make that situation easier and in order to make them think that they are on their side, when in fact in reality they're on the polar opposite side. And the way that James has written this episode has that constantly happening. We have loads of wonderful references to that of England and basically cities in England. We have a reference to Peterborough being a lost ancient city. We even have archaeologists arguing over the pronunciation of scone and basically trying to recreate the recipe for a scone or scone many, many years later after it's been eventually lost in the mists of time. Then we also have that political link in there as well. Where it is that close to home, it is unsettling and it is scary, because we have this power station that people know is a risk to the others around who live in close proximity to it, and yet nobody in power seems to care. It has been raised on a number of concerns in meetings in the past, however nothing has been done, and when the Doctor comes into the situation he wants action immediately. However, they say okay, we will take action, it's going to be in the meeting in 2 weeks time, and then it'll eventually go to a tribunal, and then eventually, possibly in 2 months time, we might have some shape of a conclusion to set the wheels in motion to change what is currently going on, and with some luck, maybe in a year or two it will change. And quite obviously when you have a power station on the brink of collapse, that is not good enough. In fact, the way that James writes this story, it constantly has you thinking about people in power and grabbing power. We have some wonderful references to the people on the planet of Testament and that relationship between them and humans, and we have a wonderful reference to the North basically being uninhabitable, which is of course a reference to that of the North and South divide. And then we also have references in there as well to them being low-skilled workers and people not quite getting their culture. So we have that social link in there as well, but also that governmental, basically they will do it as long as money is involved, and money is involved throughout this story, and that is what's creating the danger. And that is what I was referring to earlier when I was saying about a sour taste in the mouth, because the very end of this story, I'm not going to spoil, but basically we see the events of course being summarised and the Doctor and Turlough eventually leaving. However, the tone that they leave within this society, there is a spark of hope there, but at the same time some people make it out of this story with their role still in society. It's not like that they've been overthrown, they're still there doing the same thing that they did before, and for Turlough and the Doctor, that is rather difficult. And throughout the story you definitely see the Fifth Doctor kind of questioning why he even bothers helping humanity in the first place, which, as it says throughout the behind the scenes, that is something that we also start to see kind of within the 12th Doctor era, that humanity isn't all good and brilliant. You have very challenging people within society, and this episode definitely encounters those. And one final compliment, because we have the whole reason why they're able to make this power throughout this story. I'm going to mention it because it is referred to very, very early on, and it's not really too key to the actual plot itself, and that is what I like. Basically, the way that they're creating this immense amount of power is through the separation of an atom, and basically getting one atom and putting it in 2 different time zones, so it kind of exists in 2 different points in reality, and then bringing them together is creating this form of energy, and as a result that is creating power. And it's explained in a very simple way. We have a few minutes dedicated to it at the very start of the story as they decide to do one of the experiments, and then other than that, that is the main cause of course of the blazing throughout this story, but that is it. It doesn't matter about the sciencey stuff. It's certainly not an episode filled with technobabble. It's an episode that is focused on character and emotion and is a really good commentary on that. The sciencey stuff is kind of left to one side, which is what I really like, as other episodes within the main range I feel wouldn't do that. They would focus in on it. This story is different because it doesn't do that, and I think that it's most certainly to this release's benefit. So overall, for The Blazing Hour, as written by James Kettle, featuring Peter Davison as the Fifth Doctor and Mark Strickson as Turlough, a really good story. I in fact really do recommend this one. If you have a little bit of spare cash and you want to get a story that is a little bit different to usual, kind of just a blind pick of any old Big Finish episode, this is actually one that is most certainly worth considering because the story is refreshing, it's different, it does something that I've not really encountered in a Big Finish monthly range story in quite a while. At times it can be on the nose when it comes to its political commentary, but that's what I like about it. It's not an episode that is feel good, it's gripping and it's interesting, and it leaves that sour taste because humans can be awful, and this episode truly represents that. Some absolutely brilliant moments from both the Fifth Doctor and Turlough, but equally the supporting cast in there as well are brilliant. I think they've been written excellently by James, and they really do leap off the page, and equally when that is coupled with some excellent sound design and direction, especially when recorded remotely, this episode truly is in fact quite a delight to experience. However, not in a positive way, but more of an intriguing one, really highlighting how negative humanity can be. So thank you very much for watching this review. I really hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on The Host Productions for brand new Doctor Who content each and every week. And on that note, I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.